to an early start this morning, and today is going to be an FPV drone day. Or perhaps what I should say is today is going to be a very long day with about an hour of FPV stuff right in the middle of it. This is a good breakfast burrito. It's got eggs, potatoes, bacon, green chili, and a lot of you probably have no idea what I'm talking about when I say green chili. People picture chili as ground beef, beans, and a red sauce. But if you're around here, people are passionate about their green chili, and you may picture something completely different than what I'm talking about when I talk about that. Now, has that got anything to do with this video? Not really, but it's not a bad analogy for what I am talking about in this video. And that simply is understanding terminology and understanding how somebody else describes something. In the world of FPV drones, I'm finding there is lots of terminology that is not well explained or defined when you start out. Things like FPV, PID, OCD, VTX, ESC. What does all that stuff mean? And most places don't explain it very well. You go to websites for the companies that make drones, that make components, sell the components, the vloggers that are talking about drones. There's lots of people on YouTube that are talking about this, but they all assume you sort of know what they're talking about to start with. And if you don't speak the language, it gets pretty tough to understand what's going on. Now, one of my earlier videos I shared to a Facebook group I joined, the Colorado Drone Club, and somebody on that group, Emilio, said, "I think I can help you out." But unfortunately, Emilio lives in Boulder, and Boulder is 3+ hours away from Beulah on a really good day. And there aren't any really good days as far as traffic is concerned between Colorado Springs and Boulder anymore. Well, it looks like it's going to be about a 4.5 hour drive by the time we get there. Just coming into Boulder. This particular view of Boulder and the Flatirons can be quite spectacular when the sun is shining, but today it's a little bit washed out because it's cloudy. But that makes for a nice driving day because there's no sun glare. So I go through all the trouble to drive this far and meet with somebody for only probably an hour. And this is going to be close to a 12-hour day before it's all said and done. But quite simply, it's because it's hard to find the information you're looking for when, one, you're not sure what you're looking for, but two, the manufacturers, the dealers, the people who are making YouTube videos about FPV drones all kind of assume you have a certain knowledge base that I just don't have. Kind of like teaching somebody to drive that doesn't know you have to put the key in the ignition to turn the car on, but your first lesson is step on the gas. If you don't know how to start the car, you're never going to be able to go anywhere. And that's kind of where I'm at in this journey, although it's getting a lot better. And the project for today is to try and get this iFlight Megabee. It's what's called a cinewoop in the air. It's a little bit smaller than the 5-inch drone that I'm planning to build. Going to fly a little bit slower, much smoother video hopefully, as well as perhaps being a little bit easier to control right out of the box than the other one will be once I get it done. So it's going to be a good intermediate step into learning how to fly FPV. This came as what they call a bind and fly. And bind and fly essentially means that you link the drone or quadcopter with the radio. That's called binding. And I figured out how to do this with that little tiny hawk that I was showing you in the basement a few videos back. But this doesn't come with any instructions. It doesn't tell you how to do it. I'm not even sure if there's a bind button with it. And when I wrote the manufacturer and said, hey, are there any instructions? They gave me a nice apology and said they're working on it, but they didn't have any instructions. There's that assumption that you kind of know what you're doing and you can at least get that far. Now, since I've made this appointment with Emilio and decided to come up here, I think I figured out how to do that, but I figured I'd already scheduled this. And instead of him planning a day to meet with me and then me canceling on him because I think I can figure it out, I figured I might as well come up here, work with him. He's going to have a friend here that knows about this stuff as well. So we're probably going to be able to get that to work. The other issue is once you get this connected to the radio, you can fly it, but for it to be FPV, this then has to talk to the goggles that you wear, and that's another whole thing. I can find out what model video transmitter this has in it, but I have found no instructions for how to set the channel or the band on the video transmitter. so that it will talk with the goggles. Those two things have to be matched, and they're adjustable. You can change. So if you're flying with somebody else, you can say, well, you're on that channel, I'm going to change to this channel, and you change this, and you change the goggles, kind of like changing channel on a television. But I have no idea how to do that. I get the impression that it can all be done using the radio, and you can see what you're doing through the goggles, but it has to be set up to do that, and that's again something I can't find any good instructions for how to set up. So hopefully Emilio and his friend can get through that, and if that's all we get done today, it was a successful day. Fast forward a few days, and I thought I would explain what happened after the last little bit that you were just watching. I didn't do any video of the actual process. I thought that might be a little bit presumptuous of me to set a camera out in front of a couple of people I had never met before. So I decided not to bother with a video. But let me tell you, the entire experience was absolutely insane. And by that I mean the classic definition of insanity, meaning trying the same thing over and over again and hoping for different results. But interestingly, eventually doing the same thing over and over again did work. We did get this thing to fly. Of course, if you were watching the beginning of the video, you probably already figured out that it's at least been in the air somewhat. Now this has a Crossfire nano receiver in it. It probably didn't mean anything to a lot of you. And I have a Crossfire transmitter on the radio. And the Crossfire instructions sort of imply that these things should just kind of hook up automatically and do a few things to the radio to make sure it's got the right firmware. You push the button, turn this on, and it should just link up. Unless it's been bound to a radio previously, and then there's some other instructions that I've never actually seen. But it just never seemed to work. So we redid all the software that goes on the radio that helps run the Crossfire transmitter. Didn't do anything. We reloaded the firmware. That didn't work. We tried to bind it again. We did all sorts of things over and over again in a circle, going to older versions of the firmware. Finally, we ended up taking the back off of the drone, pulling the little receiver cart out of the back, flipping it over, which is where the bind button is, which is typically what you have to do to bind these things, although this shouldn't require that. But once we found the bind button, we were able to get the little green light on this to flash, along with the green light on the back of the radio, which mean they should be binding, but they weren't. And so we did that over and over again, reloading firmware, trying older versions of firmware, and we weren't sure what to do, and I was pretty close to just giving up and deciding that maybe I needed to send this back because there was something defective. Let's try it one more time. And it worked. Don't know why it worked. Don't know what we did different. Don't think we did anything different. Maybe the firmware update from the radio finally made it over to this because that's the only way you can update this. I'm not sure what happened, but now they're bound. We went out in the backyard, we flew it a little bit, brought it back in, did a few other things. And I learned a little bit about Betaflight, which is the software that communicates with the flight controller, and you can change all sorts of things in that I don't understand, so I'm not messing with it. But apparently there's still some things that could be done that would make this fly better. But right now it flies. I'm able to control it more or less, and that's okay for now, and I'll learn more about Betaflight later. There's just a whole lot of information there. There's page after page with lots of options. I'm really afraid I might screw things up worse if I mess with it without knowing what I'm doing. And over time, I'm sure I will become more comfortable with Betaflight and all the other software that you can use to work with these things and be able to do those little tune-ups, that little, if I just tweak this a little bit, let's try that, then you go back and you trial and error till it flies just the way you want it to. But the estimated hour that I thought I was going to spend there turned into about a 4-hour day there, maybe a little bit longer. And consequently, it was well after dark, well after dinner time by the time I finally got back home. The next day I went out and flew this in the yard here, and the first battery went really pretty well. You know, it was a little unstable and had to do some wild turns to get away from things. But overall, not too bad. So I put another battery in it, got a little bit braver, flew it a little bit further, clear to the other side of the house and over by the shop, and I completely lost the video feed to the goggles. When it got to the other side of the house and that far away, the video transmitter just would not get a signal back to the goggles. That got back there, I could see the signal breaking up. I tried to turn it, I tried to bring it back towards me, but somehow I think I ended up just turning a full 360. It flew back away, hit a tree, Took me 45 minutes of tromping around in the snow and on the hills in the complete wrong direction initially, till I got up to a high point, put the goggles on, and I could see just the slightest little image in the goggles. And by turning and looking at various places, I could say, well, the signal's a little stronger this way. You walk that way a ways, you put the goggles on, you do it again. And eventually I kind of worked my way around in circles until I found the thing still in working shape, still in pretty good condition. Nothing's broken on it. Everything seems to work. GoPro was still running after more than 45 minutes. And even though crashing was certainly not my intent, it's sort of part of the process. The people that fly these all the time say build, fly, crash, repeat. So that's my first real crash with one of these things, and it survived and everything is good. And we're going to keep flying it some more. I'm going to learn a little more about it. Then hopefully we can see some video from it that's really pretty good. But I think what I will do is leave you with all of the decent flight video from that. There'll be several minutes of it. The batteries don't last all that long. And the stuff of me landing it and taking off again isn't all that interesting. So I'll just put together the stuff that looks pretty good, flying around the property, flying around the house, getting to know the Megabee cinewoop. But for now, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, I'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button. Stick around, watch the end of the video if you want to see that crash scene one more time. And then I'll see you for the next video. Hey, we found it. Look at that. Everything looks to be in pretty good shape. I don't see any damage. That was about 45 minutes hunting for this thing, I think, but I'll take a look at the film or the digital recording on the GoPro and see. But that was quite the adventure going to hunt for this. I went completely the wrong direction, circled most of the way around the property, zigzagging around. Probably got a mile and a half worth of trudging through the snow and up and down the slopes. Twisted my ankle, not badly luckily, but we found it. We're a success.